Hi, this is Max Hawthorne, author of the Cronus Rising series of Paleofiction novels. If you're one of my fans or followers, you know that I occasionally dabble in paleontology and cryptozoology. Today we're going to be focusing on the latter. Last month I did an analysis of a video filmed off the coast of Norway, which featured a female killer whale sporting a plethora of injuries. What was interesting about the video was the Orca's injuries appeared to be inconsistent with bite marks made by the marine animals, at least the known list of possible offenders, and seemed to preclude such possibilities as impacts by a boat, prop damage, things of that nature. Let's take a look at the original video. And this is featured on the Facebook group, the page Carcharodon, carcharias. Let everybody take a quick look at this. We'll do a quick refresher before we move ahead. You got your injured cow orca there. And at the bottom of the screen you can see a very large and well-fed bull orca that's accompanying her. She vanishes off. You can see she's got a lot of injuries. So let me just stop it right there. So the first thing you want to notice about this injured animal right away is the fact that it's got a lot of tooth punctures on it. Bite marks, actually. These are a little hard to see when it's swimming, because there is a cloud of what I believe to be fish scales from herring or something there, but if you stop it right here where it's a little bit clearer, you get a close look. You can see she's got a huge wedge-shaped bite. This is a tooth row here and here. This is the same bite where it slipped as it shook her apparently, or she struggled. You could see where the teeth ripped in the blubber. Another very large bite that came up here that encompassed her flank and also her pectoral fin, and half the pectoral fin is bitten off, presumably when this bite slipped out. It was still holding onto the fin. There was a struggle and it came free. You can also see that she's got right here on her flank, on her ventral region, there is a last bite, which I presume happened when she was getting away, probably with the help of her pod mates, where something with a wedge-shaped snout was holding on to her. You can see the tip where it narrows right there. It's like a triangle. And the teeth gouged her flesh, the blubber, as she broke free. So this animal is obviously in bad shape. One other thing we can tell about it, I'm going to back up here, is you can see that it's also emaciated. You'll see how the head, I'm going to have to shift this sideways, unfortunately. These homemade things. But anyway, the head has that peanut shape that an orca gets when it's starving to death. Very thinned out also. And you can tell the way she moves. She's in bad shape. Possible sepsis from a bite or who knows what. So, okay. Well, I guess I'll touch on this. So something that I mentioned briefly, especially during the interview I did with Monster X, they asked me how I thought something like this would have gone down if this animal was attacked by other predators. But my take on it is as follows. I believe that whatever attacked this orca, and we'll go over the possibilities, I think there was two animals. I think one of them hit her from the side coming this way and clamped down on her here. I think a second one clamped down on her here. And the reason I say two animals is a killer whale. She's not alone in her pod. And a pod of orcas is not going to allow a member of the pod to be attacked by another predator without retaliating. So you can be sure there was a pitched battle, quite a melee going on. I think that once she broke free of this one that ripped away her flipper probably got that last bite in down here as she made a break for it. So now the question remains, of course, let's look at the actual suspects and see in detail if we can come up with what might have caused this bite. I think first let's go with inanimate objects first, namely abandoned fishing nets, props, propellers, collisions, things of that nature. So first thing we've got here is we've got a very brutal image of a sperm whale, and this poor whale has got a fishing net embedded in its brow. The cables of the net have actually sheared through the flesh, and this is a combination of time, swimming, and of course, as we know, sperm whales dive for food. When this animal is diving straight down, all these floats on this net, it's going to be fighting their buoyancy, and that's going to be making drag, and it's going to dig in like that. Horrific damage. Fortunately, that net was eventually cut free. Now we've got a whale shark. This one is not as bad, but obviously whale sharks swim slowly and they don't go diving 5,000 feet straight down. But once again, you can see the abrasion that a net causes. And in this tiny picture, another sperm whale that's got what look like net cuts or slices on its brow. So the net is highly unlikely to have caused that. Impossible, honestly. Let's look at things like propeller wounds, prop damage. Now this orca, coincidentally, has fairly well healed wounds from a prop. You can see them there. It's like slice, 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 like a deli slicer, and that's exactly what happens. You're talking a steel prop slicing through flesh before the animal even knows it's been hit. Partially healed wounds on the left on an orca. These are stage wounds. They show fresh and then periods of healing. And again, a poor whale shark with its face sliced up by a prop. A horrific wound on an adult humpback whale. This is probably from a ship's propeller. The wound is enormous. I'm surprised the animal survived. And this is again a killer whale with prop strike to the peduncle in front of its flukes. This strike was pretty bad. You can see here the vertebrae in the tail region were actually shattered and healed. So, point being, none of these look like the wounds that we see on this animal. This is a fang mark, a fang mark, a fang mark, a fang mark, etc. There's no slicing and dicing going on from a propeller, no ligature marks like you'd see from a net. Now, let's move on to animate causers. This is actually an animal that was never touched on previously, but we're going to look at it anyway, the cookie cutter shark. This is again a killer whale. These are scars from a cookie cutter's bites, and these are fresh ones. They're shallow, as you can see, they're round. I mean, if you had a perfect pattern of these forming a nice wedge shape, if the cookie cutter could function in groups and be organized before another orca came along and plucked it off of its podmate, you might be able to convince somebody that this looks sort of like a bite, but at the same time, you're not going to get that gouging as the orca is thrashing back and forth trying to free itself from its attacker, the tearing in the flesh, etc. It's a circular bite, which the cookie cutter is known for, hence the name. Now we're on to shark bites. Now the perfect shark bite comes when you get something like a manta ray that's subjected to an attack, as this one was with what must have been either a great white or a tiger. Because the animal itself is fairly flat, it's able to take out an entire Pac-Man-like bite out of it, which fortunately, if not killed, does heal over time. Here you see a different one. See the thickness of the bite over here. But the point is, shark bites are very telltale. Their shape is there, the flesh is excised from it. This whale shark was attacked by a large macropredatory shark. It sheared off most of its dorsal, and then it was hit here on the side. You could see where the jaws clamped down here, the upper, the lower here, and then it came down together and pulled outward, removing a nice chunk. I've told people this before. I like to refer to this region on a whale shark where they have this extended ridge here. It's called a caudal keel. I call it their crumple zone, and I believe that it actually evolved because they're slow swimmers to protect them from the type of attack you'd get like that. See, it takes a bite here, and this is mostly just skin. enables the whale shark to survive the attack, swim off with its musculature intact, and the shark attacking it gets just a distasteful mouthful. Oh, by the way, this is the same whale shark a week or two later, rapidly healing. But again, shark bite. Large strike to the head of a whale shark. Again, that's a bite. And this, probably the most impressive shark bite in recent history, a 40-foot whale shark with a 4-foot hunk taken out of it. The shark that did this was probably approximately the size of the whale shark. So as you can see, shark bites not on the menu. The sperm whale, another possibility, large predator, attacked sometimes by killer whales, will fight back. Problem with the sperm whale is teeth only in the lower jaw. Teeth are widely spaced, more blunt. You don't have that wedge-shaped jaw. Everything is parallel. You get those double rows of teeth with wide separation. These do not match the type of holes you see in the orca, either in the shape, they're parallel, no wedge, and they're more further spaced, like big pegs. Here's another example, and this is further proof that we're not dealing with a sperm whale. I saw, for example, a 50-foot sperm whale skeleton when I was in Hawaii the last time, and the jaw was about this thick, or would have been if it had meat on it. This is only using her forearm as a gauge, a foot thick, maybe 14 inches at most. And the maximum you're going to get on a giant sperm whale is maybe 18 inches. But if we look at that orca's bite, we can tell that and I'll show you this later, the bite on the top is 3 feet across. Now, this is a dead bull sperm whale. This shows you what a sperm whale's bite looks like. This is from combat interspecies aggression between males, undoubtedly. And you can see here where the teeth have started to try and dig in and looped as they kind of slash at one another during mating. You get more squid damage down here, but these type of curving bites where they're chewing away at their enormous heads is what you kind of expect from a sperm whale's teeth. I would suspect that the whale that bit this one was larger. You can see how close together its teeth are, and these are much further apart. So he was probably bitten by a bigger bull. Now here, you've got another dead sperm. Once again, you've got those peg-like parallel rows. But this is squid damage. Most squid have hooks on their suckers. The giant squid, for example, has a tiger claw that comes out of the center. And when they're being consumed, obviously they fight back. You get this type of slashing and scratching as the whale is devouring its prey. Again, squid damage. Then you've got this old guy, and this one's got scars from suckers and everything else under the sun on there. So we can safely assume that a sperm whale is also not our candidate. I mean, look at this. Orcas typically have a dorsal 3 feet high. That's about the width here, 3 feet. Sperm whale's jaw would be about maximum from here to here, and they would be parallel. You're not seeing that. These teeth are closer together, further apart than you'd see with an orca, but not as far as you'd see with a sperm. And of course you've got a sheared off fin. That requires some sharp teeth to do that. Which leads us now to this image. This is a photo that cryptozoologist Scott Martis was kind enough to send me recently. This is an adult humpback whale which is sporting a series of orca bites on its face and head. And he suggested that we compare this to the image of the wounded orca from Norway. Now if we look at this, and I don't know how well this is going to come out with this sort of home recording system I've jury rigged for you, but basically you can see an orca bite here, another bite here, here, some slashing from teeth. There's another one over here where they went for the eye. It looks like they were trying to seize this humpback by its lower jaw, possibly turn it, maybe pull it away from its calf, drown it. Who knows? I mean, orcas are obviously a sadistic lot when it comes to this type of thing, but the point is we can clearly see that that's the oval-shaped front jaw, head-on bite from a killer whale. It's interesting if you think about it. Killer whale is such a large animal, you would think that these bites would be wider, but when push comes to shove, if you see them head on, it's like a lot of cetaceans and even pliosaurs. The maxilla and mandible are actually comparatively narrow when you look at the rest of the head. Of course, this enables them to exert more force when biting, maximizing pressure. So, with this image at our disposal, I figured the thing to do is now is to try and figure out and confirm, is the killer whale in Norway merely a victim of interspecies aggression, which is the knee-jerk reaction to a lot of people. I spoke to one of the top marine biologists in the world, and he said, barring any other information, that's what he would automatically go to. Although he also said, of course, that he'd never seen images of wounds like that before. So, that being said, let's try and see if we can find out once and for all whether or not the bites on the Norway animal, the wounds, were caused by killer whale bites. So what we're going to do is basically, we're going to use this obviously as part of our study, and then I wanted to basically draw a comparison for size between a killer whale, a female, and an adult humpback whale. So when we're looking at the killer whale, and yes, this dorsal would be a male, but forget that. We're going to go with the fact that this is a female, so pretend that's not there. So we went with an average length of approximately 20 feet for this animal. Most cow orcas range from 16 plus to 23 plus feet, so this is smack in the middle, an average of around 20. Most orcas that feed on salmon and fish like that tend to be the larger kind anyway, but 20 is a safe bet. When it comes to our humpback, we're going by using 50 feet as the average, and that's because male humpbacks are pushing 50 feet, female humpbacks are typically 50 or a foot or two over, so once again 50 puts us safely in the middle. Measuring her out based on the image here, I was able to come up with a measurement of 8 feet from the tip of the snout to the curve in the jaw here. So that's how we're able to reference that up to our orca, boom, boom, and get our 20-foot length, just to keep everything in proportion and keep everything honest. So now that we had that, I was able to combine the killer whale from Norway with an adult humpback to get a fairly accurate approximation of how big the killer whale would have looked if it was right next to the humpback whale. So this is what we get. Now, this image is very telling. The first thing is, if you look, this is your head-on orca bite. Here. This is the bite of what attacked the killer whale. This bite is much, much bigger. The teeth were bigger. The spacing between the teeth is bigger. And of course you can see this characteristic wedge shape. So whatever did this, we can safely assume it had a fairly large skull, as I estimated before, about 8 feet in length. This animal was not attacked by another killer whale. It's impossible. It would have to be an orca the size of Leviathan, and I don't think she would have survived the attack if it was. At any rate, so where does that leave us? I mean, we're looking at something that has a long, wedge-shaped head that did this damage. It is not another killer whale. So what are we dealing with? Is it some sort of gigantic marine crocodile? Is it a Mosasaur? I mean, the possibilities loom large. I did this on the last episode where I took a prognathodon skull. This prognathodon was a huge predatory Mosasaur, and I crunched the numbers and stretched it out, the image, until it reached 8 feet, and it seemed to line up perfectly with the teeth. Now, does that mean it's a prognathodon swimming around? I don't know. One might hope, or hope not. So, very nice Mosasaur image, by the way, by the paleo artist known as Tico. Can there be a Mosasaur out here? Well, when I was on Monster X radio, I discussed that possibility. They asked me, and I gave them a slew of sightings, recent sightings of Mosasaurs that have been seen. as early as 2001, or as recent, I'm sorry. Teens boogie boarding, Pekekariki, if I could say that right, talked about a gigantic animal breaching in front of them, and they described it perfectly as being a mosasaur. In 2006, a New Zealander named Ian Levy has his boat attacked for an hour by what he describes as a pair of 20-foot crocodiles with fins, returns home with a wrecked boat, and no, he did not have insurance to get money. So the image of a crocodile with fins is very common in descriptions of mosasaurs, and the fact is many sightings do say there are a pair of these things, which would lend itself to what happened here. If they swim as a mated pair, that would make sense and make them all the more formidable. Here, 4 or 5 years ago in 2014, a UK resident by the name of Paul George, somebody that I interviewed actually, he saw what was eventually christened the Carnival Cruise Monster and described what sounded like a gigantic mosasaur keeping pace with his ocean liner. Of course, I had Paul look at the footage of the Orca, and he said what he had seen could have eaten that killer whale. So he figured that it was a baby, as he put it. You know, the one that attacked the Norway animal. So point being, that leaves us in a position, though, of saying, okay, so we've basically proven that, to a point at least, that we know a propeller didn't hurt that animal. We know that it wasn't a fishing net or a collision with a ship, and it wasn't any of these other animals that we looked at. So let's focus on some mosasaur fossil evidence and see what's there and how that lines up. So what we've got here is an ammonite, which shows punctures from a mosasaur's teeth. Another ammonite. Boom, 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 boom. You can see those tooth punctures look eerily similar to what was on the killer whale. Another ammonite. This one, you're starting to see that wedge shape right there. A triangle, just like on the dorsal region of the killer whale off Norway. Oh, by the way, I should mention Scott Martis was kind enough to send in these images so that I could add them to this for you guys. And some of this material, especially these images right here, are also from a paper released by paleontologist Mike Everhart. So we want to make sure credit is given. Over here you see here these bones. This is another mosasaur that was attacked and killed by a larger of its kind. These gouges, they kind of look like the slip marks in the blubber of the Norway animal. This is the skull of the mosasaur that was killed by another of its kind. And again down here you see these punctures, boom, 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 and then the gouging. Obviously gouging in bone and in a skull that's almost like a crocodile is going to be different than something grabbing a bulky animal like an orca that's got 4 inches of blubber covering it, but the point is the effects are the same. Again, it's like Morse code, dot, 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 that wedge shape. And this one, I mean, it's almost like they were tailor-making it for this presentation. This is another big ammonite with the bite of a mosasaur, and the scientist who studied it was able to actually do an outline of the head and line it up perfectly with the teeth. If I flip it upside down like this, you can see this is just like that dorsal bite. Da 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 da. Animal comes in from the side, grabs the whale. The whale's fighting for its life. Its attacker shakes it violently, adjusts its grip, trying to kill it. It's quite possible. Does that 100% say there's a living mosasaur? No, but it is intriguing. And that is a possible culprit right there. Scary thought. Something like that, 50, 60 feet long with an 8-foot head like that swimming around. Not something you'd want to encounter in the water. So, in summation, we're going back to the video here. I think it's fairly obvious that the known traditional explanations for this killer whale's injuries don't fit the bill. Short of the animal having been captured and, I don't know, lacerated by some mad scientist, injured internally, or infected with some sort of pathogen to sicken it or something prior to releasing it again, I think we have to consider the possibility that there is another marine carnivore out there that is competing with, or even attempting to prey upon, the sea's traditional apex predator. Whether this is some sort of large marine crocodilomorph or a species of mosasaur that, like the coelacanth, survived the KT event, or something we've never even heard of, remains to be seen, but I think this footage strongly suggests that it's out there. This is Max Hawthorne, and I hope you enjoyed my investigation into the Norway footage. If you enjoy marine adventures or stories of prehistoric life alive in the present, be sure to check out my series of Cronus Rising novels on Amazon.